Hey, folks, welcome to Affiliate Nerd Out. I am your nerderator, Dustin House, spreading that good word about affiliate marketing. And joining me in the Nerdatorium today, Kyle Bandaho. Welcome to the Nerdatorium, my friend.
Dustin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. We've had this scheduled for a long time, so excited it finally happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and I met via trying to work out an affiliate deal. Didn't necessarily happen, but I figured out that you are a big sports and baseball nerd. So we joined together forces there, and I ended up buying your book, which has been really awesome.
You did. Thank you again. That very much appreciated for buying that. And yeah, baseball fans always stick together.
Movies with Balls is the book, and it's a great read. A lot of fun. I love the illustrations in it. You did a great job, and I went through and first did all the baseball movies, and there's
Of
a lot of
course.
baseball nerds in this viewership in affiliate marketing altogether. Weirdly enough.
I mean, yeah, I always think like baseball people, like sport athletes in general, like sports fans, like gravitate to sales. It's like the competitive aspect of that thing. Like I knew that was probably what I was going to do when I was done playing. So yeah, no, I mean, yeah, baseball and marketing or baseball and sales just go hand in hand.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about our topic of the day, and that's podcasts and working on performance basis and CPMs and the world of podcasting in general. Tell us a little bit about what you do and who you work for.
So I've got a pretty thorough background with podcasting. I've been a freelance, I would say, quote unquote, content creator for um like 8+ years now. First, like starting out with just like writing and blogging for websites. I moved into podcasting. I've had 3 shows, 2 of which are still current, and both of those are 5+ years deep. I've done a weekly sports movie podcast every Monday since 2019. I've done that for almost pretty much right after I started. I joined a startup called Blue Wire Podcast, for which I now work on the sales side.
All right.
I've been with Blue Wire on the sales side for a year and a half, but I've been podcasting. I've been an independent creator with them for 6+ years. And then I do an interview series called From Phenom to the Farm that is presented by Baseball America. That is was biweekly. Now it's monthly.
Okay.
And I've been doing that since February of 2020. And so I've seen all aspects. Obviously, with my day job now, I see the direct buy, the revenue generation side of podcasting. We're a network with 300+ shows that are led by some big name like former athlete creators, Cam Newton, D'Angelo Russell, Dwight Howard, and we have essentially like big athlete tentpole shows around every major sports moment. So the Super Bowl, the NBA Finals, MLB All-Star, things like that. And then we also, Blue Wire was kind of founded on the idea, our founder Kevin Jones founded on the idea of like sports radio is transitioning into podcasting. So independent podcasts are popping up nationwide to cover the Chiefs or cover the Warriors or the Cowboys or things like that. And so we have this nationwide conglomerate of majority sports podcasts covering teams and leagues that gives us, nationwide reach. So these big, what we call our franchise name, and then a collection of shows built up of independent creators like myself, and then far larger than myself, who have built up these great communities, a lot of times like around a specific team. That gives us a really fun way to work with brands who are looking to get active in the sports space. And that could be brands who want reach on a national level or brands who want reach in a very specific market or set of specific markets.
Okay. Awesome. I've worked with podcasts in the past, and I have found some decent results with, using a vanity URL or some kind of vanity code during the reads, and got some mixed results just depending on how big the podcast is. And I think there's a certain point and level where podcasts are, hey, we've only got this many views, downloads, whatever you want to call it. And then they get to a certain point and they're like, hey, I can start monetizing this with affiliate marketing. That's our sweet spot. And then they get to a certain level and they're like, we're only taking on sponsorships. Like, do you know what kind of levels you're working with the guys that are already in that sponsorship level? It sounds like.
Yeah, I would say like the top end of our network are, yeah, they reach a certain point, like, ad slots, like mid-roll or pre-roll slots in shows kind of are like hotel rooms. Like you have a certain amount that you want, people, different kind of shows are comfortable with different kind of ad load and you want to sell those. And at a certain point, if you are a show where you can find brands who that you want to work with and want to work with you that are willing to fill those those ad spot at a certain value. You would typically take that up front, but anything under that, I think like affiliate marketing makes a ton of sense for podcasts that are looking to find a way to monetize, but don't yet have that, that multi thousands of downloads or impressions per episode, just depending on how they're publishing. And it's a great way to like find that sweet spot. And I will say, you kind of mentioned like measurement and promo codes and things like that. And that's one of the hottest topics in podcasting right now is how do you measure success? It's different for brands. They're, the big brands, the ones we see on TV advertising around sports, a lot of times they're pulling awareness plays. And with campaigns like that, you're doing brand lift studies and some really integrated ways to measure. With more performance brands, I won't name any specifically, but like if you listen to bigger podcasts, you'll hear the brands that say, hey, we're selling this, use promo code this, something related to the show, or click the link in the show notes or something like that. That's one of the most common ways of tracking. And that goes down to, like you said, affiliate marketing too. Like it's similar structure. And finding a way to, with those, what we call like performance brands, which are ones who are going strictly off their KPIs are those promo codes used, products sold. That, it's finding as an industry, we're searching for other ways to prove value and prove campaign effectiveness beyond promo codes because, you've gotten ads for stuff before, you've maybe heard a promo code or seen something, but like you find yourself then in the market for that kind of product. You do a Google search or something like that. You say, oh yeah, I remember that brand. I've heard them before. I'm going to try them. And so the podcast or wherever you heard them directly, influenced how you felt about that brand, but you might not have directly used that promo code, or it could have been months after. So it's the challenge with anything. I was in, local digital marketing for a big company before this, and we were doing the same things. Like, how do we show results beyond the direct buy, the click through, or the promo code usage? That stuff is the easiest in terms of to see that direct revenue. But as we know with advertising, there are so many other ways that advertising is helping that move that consumer along to make the decision.
Agreed. And we're not in an infancy of podcasting, but like in terms of tracking and marketing wise, like it's getting better by the day, I would say. And people are getting smarter, AI is getting smarter. But in general, like with your sports network that you have, I would assume Fanatics would be like a perfect fit for some of the shows that you have on. But what are you seeing as brands and products that are working well with the podcasts that you have?
I mean, if you just look at the sports podcasting space as a whole, obviously the gambling and daily fantasy industry is big around sports. That's what really drives those brands. And then you see if you watch an NFL game on Sundays, or you watch a baseball game or an NBA game, a lot of the advertisers you see around arenas or around on the commercials, quick service restaurants, automakers, things like that. Those are the kind of the big headline brands around some of the biggest shows in sports podcasting. But then a lot of brands in I would say like the direct performance space, supplements, clothing, specifically like athletic wear, things like that, like protein brands, like things that, you would associate with sports or a sporty person, generally work well in the sports space, as well as like any male leaning brands. Cause like I will say, like as a sports podcast network, while women's sports are growing tremendously, our network is still, our listenership is very heavily male. The way I see it in 5 years, there's probably going to be a lot more great women-led and female-driven sports podcasts, specifically with like how like crazy the WNBA is growing, the popularity around there. But like male-leaning brands. So you'll see like, like shaving, razors, trimmers, like that sort of thing. Just general male care products, things like that. So you really just think about like what applies to, a person, like a sports fan. What brands do you see if you walk through the arena? What brands do you see in the arena? What brands do you see doing like giveaways on the ticket or things like that? And it's similar with sports podcasting. And then the one thing you usually get with podcast listeners in a lot of ways is that younger audience, that kind of millennial or, Gen X audience. I would say like our park audience, it varies from show to show, but, typically 25 to 40 is what you're getting, and usually with some affluency and buying power. And yeah, so it's a wide variety. Like a lot of, sports drive conversation in this country, and a lot of brands want to be around that.
Okay, gotcha. And when I came to you, I approached you, I saw some opportunity. I'm an affiliate manager. I'm recruiting for brands that I'm working with in this health and wellness space. And I thought it was going to be a great fit. But you guys, unfortunately, aren't into the affiliate game, and that's okay. But there are other ways to work with you on whether it be a CPC or CPM, whatever basis. What is the best way for a brand manager to come to you and approach and figure out what the best type of podcast is going to be for their brand?
Yeah, the best way is just general outreach of the more information we have, the better.
Okay.
What is your target audience for this product?
Right.
That includes any demos, interest, where they live, because we can do nationwide campaigns, we can do geographic. For us, are there specific sport that brand is looking to align with? Are they into are they wanting to reach people who are really into fitness? Are they wanting to reach football fans? Are they, wanting to reach NBA fans? Things like our calendar typically like works around the sports calendar. So like when this is coming out, football is kind of in full swing, and that will be dominating my life. The day we're recording, football is already dominating my life, and it's like a month before release. But yeah, so like who do you want to reach? How do you want to reach them? The type of engagement. So there are a couple different ways you can activate with a podcast. There's your simple like host read ad that everyone is familiar with, where the host typically reads some set copy. The best host riff, find a way to make it creative, something engaging. Often if it's a product that they're trying, like meal kits are a big one that podcasters love, because podcasters love free food. They'll say stuff about, oh, I made X meal, it's delicious, things like that. That's your host read, like your baked in host read, all the way to, custom segments where the shows will take a part of their show, the actual content of their show, and name it after a brand, incorporate the brand in some way. Things like that. Like I'll say, one of my favorite campaigns we've run is with Wonderful Pistachios, which is about like, powerhouse protein and things like that. And we done a Powerhouse Performers custom segment that's brought to you by Wonderful Pistachio. So I think that's like a cool example of that. And I mean, a bunch of different ways you can activate a podcast by like amplifying mention on social media, all the way through like on-site activations and things like that. Like we kind of stress flexibility. Our creators are really good with that. When we give our creators chance to be creative for brands, that we usually see good results there. But yeah, it's basically come to us. Who do you want to reach? What sports do you want to be around? What types of creators could you be interested in? And then we work on, okay, what's your budget? And we figure out what shows and what kind of elements will work from there.
Okay, gotcha. And when brands come to you and they're like, all right, we can work off a CPM basis, like what's a budget to like dip your toes and figure out whether or not this is going to be a good channel for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say budgets and podcasting, depending on the shows that are commanding direct buy, like typically the brands we're working with, the budgets are at least 4 figures, all the way up to, we have some longtime great clients at Blue Wire spending 6 figures with us. But yeah, brands looking to test, it's probably, at least in kind of that lower 4-figure range, all the way to, again, it's kind of a, you get what you pay for. It's all a math formula. You're getting a certain CPM and a certain amount of reach for that CPM based on the reach of the show. CPMs in podcasting really vary. There's the, run of network, which are those kind of pre-recorded ads that you'll hear on the front end of a show. So it's maybe not in the show host voice, or it's a producer on the network, or it's a pre-record that the brand has that they play. Those CPMs can be single digits to low tens, depending if you want to layer targeting that increases. And then anything that around a host, getting that host voice, that's when you get PMs in the teens, low 20s. And then as you increase from there, things that involve like a bigger name of, a former app, things like that. When you start getting in with custom integrations where custom segments, signage, things like that's when, I would say things generally climb. It all comes down to a math formula, basically.
The bigger the name, the bigger the CPM there.
Typically, yes.
Okay.
I can say this because they're not a Blue Wire show, but If you want to work with the Kelsey brothers, it will cost you more on a CPM basis than to work with a local Chiefs podcast.
Yeah, and that's why, companies like Price Picks can pay the big bucks for those kinds of names. They're getting aggressive on their ad reads, by the way. But speaking of reads and like the recording process of it, I would assume there's some kind of statistics behind the progression of like whether live reads versus recorded reads, what kind of performance basis they are. Do you guys have statistics and keep statistics like that?
Again, measurement is one of the toughest things in
Yeah.
broadcasting. Typically the baked in read. So it is something read by the host. Sometimes hosts will roll in and record them live. So they'll finish their show. They'll say, hey, word from our sponsors, and they'll go right into it. Or there are hosts who will do their show, bake in ad breaks and say, like, we're going to take a break, but then they kind of cut back in and then go back and record their ads and place the ads with the show. Those are in both scenarios. It's just kind of a preference on how they prefer to record. Do they prefer to knock it out in one stretch, or do they prefer to do the show and then come back and record the ads? Typically similar performance. There's not really a difference because it's still read in host voice and things like that. Where we see, it's always hard to know what audience is going to click with a specific brand, but the best practices we've seen, I think these would apply to an affiliate performer getting a good result too, is the host who can make a read sound authentic, because you're getting some form of copy. There's a call to action. There are things the brand wants to highlight, but especially you can a lot of times tell when a host has actually used a product, when they really believe in it, when they're telling an organic story, something that makes the ad compelling versus like, wow, X brand is doing such a great job with this. They have this great 25% offer for our listeners. Like you can tell the difference. And then the host that can find a way, especially with their longtime sponsors, to organically find ways to mention them in the pod, always helps for a little boost, because rarely are you going to run one ad on a podcast and see just gangbusters results unless you're selling something absolutely incredible that no one's ever seen before. These audiences come to these shows. They choose these shows because they trust their input on sports or whatever, lifestyle, anything like that. And so if podcasters are able to authentically convey that they are also, this brand is partnering with us, this is something that, because all our shows, and like it works this for affiliate too, can give the thumbs up, thumbs down on if they want to work for a brand or work with the brand. And so if podcasters can authentically convey that this is something that they believe in, they would use in their own lives, it typically buys in that trust for the audience as well. So it's all about, coming off like, as an authentic, normal person during the read, you're generally going to see better results that way.
I hear you. That's a great point. And along with those measurements and like the vanity codes that the folks are using, is that the best practice, is the most common practice to measure those results?
Most common, certainly. We're still trying to find out if there are better ways, more things we can do to measure results for brands, because we want to be able to see every aspect of campaign success. But promo codes and vanity URLs are the most common. They're also the easiest. It's very easy for a show to say, hey, use promo code X for whatever kind of discount they're running. It's a great way to see you directly influence this person. They listened to your show, they used your code, or they used your vanity URL. We saw the click there. They're the most trackable ways. Certainly, we're trying to find, as an industry, we're still continually trying to explore what are other ways that we can attribute brand success for performance brands who are trying to see an increase in sales. We're, trying to find other ways, but yeah, right now I would say promo codes and vanity URLs are the most tried and true fashion.
I would say vanity code URLs are outstanding as well, and it works really great in the affiliate space. But that brings me to our sponsor of the day, and that is Inflection. Go check out Inflection's tracking platform. This is a perfect solution for podcasts out there that, well, not the podcasts themselves, but working with podcasters. You can make a beautiful URL that is customized to the influencer. I'm going to give you an example. This is a sports. And we've got Lindsey Vaughn here. It's showing her accolades and why she likes the product. We increase conversion rates by doing it this way with incredible landing pages. Inflection is amazing for influencers, amazing for podcasts. And if they're in that space, go give them a look. Go to dustinhouse.com/inflection. All right, moving on into another segment. Like, I'm a podcaster, you're a podcaster. There's other people that are just getting rolling in this space. Like, what's some of the best tips that you can give early podcasters into gaining some traction early?
The number one thing I always tell people when they're like, I'm thinking of starting a podcast or I want to do it, the number one thing I say is don't do this for money. Unless you are a if you are someone like Cam Newton, who's on our, is on our network, does a great job, but is a media personality who is going to generate, people who want to see his show. I would say if you want to start a podcast, you need to do it because you want to start a because you have something to say. You have, you want to do, like, I think you and I both love podcasting. I love doing my show. I recorded a great episode last night that is a conversation with 3 of my best friends, essentially talking about a movie. And that, for me, is the gist of why I do it. I just love having a creative outlet. I didn't start it to generate income. And like, I've been doing this for 6 years and it's enough to pay a couple bills, which I'm super happy with, but it's not, I clearly have a day job. And so I would say if you're going to start a podcast, like, be passionate about podcasting and what you're doing. That's the number one thing. If you're doing it, there were all those stories that came out during the pandemic of people who bought thousands of, hundreds of dollars of podcast equipment and thought they were going to, get all these sponsorships, and they do it for 6 episodes and like 60 people listen and they're like, oh, what is this? So it is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. It is not an automatic, you are going to make money. So the number one tip is, like, have a passion for what you're doing. And as you grow, like, that will come through. If you sharpen your craft, it is also not as easy as, I thought this before, it's not as easy as just turning on a mic and having a conversation. There is something to conversation cadence and learning to work with guests and learning to pace a show. My first 20 episodes of my podcast were absolutely horrible. I've gone back and listened to them and they were like just terrible. So that, if you're passionate, you're willing to put the work in, it's rep space. It's like playing sports. The first time you shoot a basketball, the 10,000th time you shoot a basketball will typically be better than the first time. So it's put the passion into what you're doing, learn how to strive to be the best at what you're doing, whatever it is you're talking about, and make sure that you're putting out a good product, and then traction will build. I mean, the only silver bullet to having a successful podcast is be famous doing something else. If you win an Oscar, start a podcast. It will do well. If you win a Super Bowl, which even then is not if you're a quarterback who wins a Super Bowl, start a podcast. It will probably do well. Other than that, if you are not outwardly famous, it's build a show that you believe in, have a lot of fun doing it, and then don't be afraid to shout yourself out. Don't be afraid to share it on your socials. Don't be afraid to take shot. Like, one of the things that has worked out best for me and has grown my shows to the point where, I'm proud of them and where they have the followings they have, which again I would say are not massive followings by any means, but are shooting shots with guests that I should have no business talking to me. The thing I found about podcasting and in the creator world, there are so many people who are so generous with their time and kind and willing to, if you haven't, like, the amount of people who have been like, sure, I'd love to come talk about my favorite movie on this pod, or with my baseball interview series. Yeah, I'd love to, talk about my career. Sure, let's set a time. The amount of people who are willing to be generous with their time will surprise you. There are plenty of people who will not respond to your messages. There are a few who say weird, like, rude things. That is few and far between. Most people, it has helped me grow my show. It has eventually helped me sell my book. It has helped me continue to grow in the podcasting space, both like personally, freelance wise, and professionally, is because people are generous. People will give advice, that will give show feedback, that will give their time to come on your show. They will help you promote your show. And that's just, like, generally you have to believe in the good in people, frankly. And, like, if you're putting out a product you believe in, trust enough that like other people will enjoy having you on the show. Like, some of I would say my co-hosts now, my regular guests on my sports movie podcast, are people I did not know before I started it. And they're now some of my best friends because, like, I sent a couple DMs at one point. And so all that whole ramble just to say, if you start a podcast, make sure you really, like, want to do it, like, you love it, and put the pride in your show and everything else will follow.
Man, so many thoughts on all of what you said. First off, I believe it's Michael Scott who said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Absolutely. No one else said that.
Yeah, no. And then I started a podcast myself to sell a product, and then it pivoted like 6 different times to the point where I just like doing this at this point. And it's never been more successful because my attitude changed in that kind of ways. And that's one of my big points on why I did like my first 100 lessons on my first 100 podcast, dustinhouse.com/pod100. And this is just all my lessons that I learned in those first 100, because it's tough. If it is tough out there, and you say, don't start a podcast if you don't want to, not going to be passionate about podcasting. I just tell people, don't start a podcast. It's not a good idea. Like, you don't know what kind of battle you're up against. And I think there was a stat like 44% of podcasts quit before 10 episodes.
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of work. If you're going to host and edit your own show, I would say like the time value of that, like think about however long your podcast is, think like time and a half for editing it.
Yeah.
So you're making like my movie podcast episodes are typically an hour and a half to 2 hours, just depending on who I have on and what we're talking about. So that's a chunk of my week. That's the time value. So you got to think about that. But like that is part of the process of having a good product, is learning to do the work on the back end as well.
Yeah. Hiring VAs has been big for me. And again, like the asking people has been, it's easy for me to do and get podcast guests to come on just by the value proposition that I create. And that's because I'm taking this content and I flip it into so many other different pieces of content. And that's a big piece that a lot of people miss early, and a big piece of the growth as well.
Yeah, I would say definitely when you're reaching out to people, like you do obviously a good job of this, but like have a reason why it would be fun for them or good for them to do your show. If you're just asking people, hey, will you do, I have a podcast, will you do it? You're not going to get as many responses. With my sports movie show early in the time, I was on Twitter a lot, and I would see, I mean, I'm still on Twitter a lot. I would see, X person has tweeted about this sports movie, and I would DM them back when DMs were like normal on Twitter. And I would say, hey, I saw you tweeting about, Blue Chips. I would love, I have a sports movie podcast. I would love to talk about Blue Chips with you on the show. And a lot of times that worked with baseball players when I'm, trying to find people for interviews, and I don't have, just because of my playing days, sometimes I have like a 6 degrees of separation. I can connect with somebody, but when it's just straight up just a cold outreach, it's a lot of like, hey, I was a big fan of your career. I would love to talk about especially this X specific time. Like my most recent guest was the most outstanding player in the 2008 College World Series. And so I was able to reach out and say, hey, I was at the 2008 College World Series. I would love to talk about it with you. Like I would love to revisit that. And so, yeah, have a specific pitch, which like that goes for everything. Like being in sales, that's, don't just say, do you want to buy from me? Because that's not usually going to work.
Great call. All right, Kyle, really appreciate your knowledge here. How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can, if you're interested for professional reasons, if you're someone who's curious about podcast advertising, or, have a brand that you're, looking at making possible direct podcast buys, you can get at me at kyle@bluewirepods.com. If you want to check out my content or have any questions about starting a podcast, like I said, so many people have been generous with their time. I'm more than happy to pass on whatever meager knowledge I have about podcasting or content creation. So you can follow me on Instagram at BanduhoKyle, and then on Twitter, for as long as I can mentally bear it, at Kyle Banduho.
Fantastic. All right, folks, keep on recruiting, and we'll see you out there. Take